So the pre-orders for the 10th edition launch box Leviathan have been announced, and next week starts a 2-week pre-order window before the official launch of the next edition of Warhammer 40k, which should hopefully give us just enough time to go through a few more of the upcoming rules, abilities, datasheets, and other cool things that we can expect when the edition does finally reach our hands. And so today, let's take a look at the Avatar of Khaine. The Avatar is an interesting datasheet for me because he looks like he is going to still be very, very durable. However, of course, this does come with the trade-off that he isn't a leader or a lone operative even, so he is still going to be very susceptible to being focused down by enemy fire before he can make a big impact on the game. On the profile front, with a 10-inch move and toughness 12 supported by 14 wounds and a 2-up armor save, 4-up invuln save, he is on the tankier side of things, and he can definitely make a turn 2 charge if he needs to. He also has the Strands of Fate rule, so you can potentially use some dice to make sure he lives if he gets targeted by something really scary like a railgun. But the main chunk of his durability actually comes in his molten form, which in the same way as it currently is in 9th edition, gives him a huge buff in that you just half any damage from attacks going into him. So even that brand new railgun with its terrifying d6 plus 6 damage will only be doing a maximum of 6 damage to him instead of 12. And yes, whilst this is exactly the same rule as he has now, in 10th edition it does seem like reduced damage abilities and damage caps are, in almost every other aspect and character we've seen, going the way of the dodo, so the Avatar keeping this is quite a big deal, and I do think it's going to make him, even without lone operative or, leader, one of the hardest units to put down when you see him across the battlefield from you. On the damage front, his Wailing Doom has seen in some ways a buff, in some ways a nerf to its shooting attack. It's no longer a beam, but instead has the sustained hits D3 rule, so you can potentially get 4 hits from this thing into a single model, whilst the current 9th edition version could potentially get 2 or 3 hits on various different units thanks to how the beam rule works. It is strength 16, minus 4 AP and d6 plus 2 damage, so it's still wounding pretty much everything in the game on 2s and 3s and cleaving through most armor saves. So I think overall I would say it's marginally better than the current 9th edition version. At least personally I think it's a bit better. I think sustained hits is going to be a little bit more useful than the beam rule is because of how you have to line that up and kind of get it all in. Now you can just potentially get up to 4 hits if you manage to roll a 6 to hit, which with the Strands of Fate dice you can potentially guarantee if you want to. So yeah, range, I would say some people might not like it as much, but I think overall he's seen a little bit of a buff. But of course, the real arena for the Avatar's damage is in melee. And he still has his dual profile for attacking. The strike is now 6 attacks all the time, so it has dropped 1 compared to his top bracket in 9th, but equally it no longer degrades down to 5, so he is more consistent all the way through his 14 wounds now, which is nice. It has dropped an AP down to 4, and also being strength 14 in 10th edition means that against the toughest enemies in the game, he will be wounding on 4s, and even against rhinos, he is now wounding on 3s rather than 2s like he does in 9th, so he has actually got marginally worse in melee with the strike profile. The sweep has stayed the same, it is still strength 7, minus 2 AP and a flat 2 damage, so I mean don't get me wrong, he's still very, very scary in melee, and he'll average a good 20 odd wounds to something like an Imperial Knight, so with a slightly lucky spike or the use of a fate dice, you should fairly reliably be able to kill a knight by shooting it and then charging in the Avatar in 10th edition, which is not a bad return depending on how much the Avatar costs. And then even if it does survive, if we use the Knight Despoiler profile, the Fist profile for 10th edition, which we saw in one of the faction focus articles, thanks to the Avatar's 4-up invuln and his half damage, the Fist only does 8 damage to the Avatar, which is then of course half down to 4, so even the Knight smashing his fist into him is still nowhere close to actually taking out the Avatar in one round of combat, so he is still super durable, and he's still very good at dishing out damage in 10th edition. The final thing for the Avatar is that his bloody-handed aura has also changed. This currently gives core units within 6 inches a reroll on their charges. This is now just moved to any Aeldari unit, which is of course obvious because core is gone, and it now gives you +1 to advance and charge rolls. So in some ways, yes, that is arguably a bit of a nerf. The reroll did give you a good bit of consistency with your core units. However, it does help you now that you have that reassurance of knowing you're always going to make a 3-inch charge if you're in that position, or if you want to use a fate dice, you can use it to guarantee you do make the charge with that +1 rather than just relying on the reroll, which at the end of the day, although it does give you more consistency, a reroll could always fail you, whereas with that +1 and by using a fate dice, you can know for sure that you will be able to make the charge if you really need to. So yes, in some ways it is a bit of a nerf, but in other ways you could argue it does give you a bit more reliability in knowing exactly what your charge is going to be. And I mean, especially if some units can advance and charge for the Aeldari, that pretty much just gives you an extra 2 inches to their overall movement. So it can be a nice buff in some situations, and of course a really big change is that it affects a lot more stuff now. It isn't just core, it is all Aeldari units. So notably, this does also now buff the Avatar himself. So if nothing else, it is, although maybe a nerf to things like aspect warriors, to the Avatar himself, it's just a free extra 1 inch of movement to your charge rolls. So that does make the Avatar a bit more reliable at getting into combat. So even if you think it's a nerf overall, for the Avatar himself, this is a nice little boost. And that is it for the Avatar of Khaine, based on the datasheet we've seen. Obviously, we haven't seen the other side, so don't know what is going to be on there. But he is looking pretty damn good still, I think. The fact that he still halves damage in an edition where a load of that kind of stuff has been taken away does mean he is going to be quite a tough cookie to take down. And when he does get into combat, he is still very, very capable of pretty much taking out a knight in 1 round. So he's still very tanky, very killy, and he still does give a fairly nice buff. It's not quite as nice as before, but he still does give a fairly nice buff to all of the Aeldari units around him. But as always, what do you make of his new rules for 10th edition? Is he still going to be a terrifying threat, or are you not too worried about him? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do like and subscribe for more Warhammer content from me, but until next time, I'll catch you later guys.